Braindead, a streetwear brand that seemingly came out of nowhere, has taken the climbing scene by storm in recent years. Combining highbrow and lowbrow art, their staple from the beginning was the graphic tee. Design inspirations coming from everywhere, psychedelic hippie art from the 1960s to sci-fi futurism and beyond. Similar to a mellow t-shirt, if you see someone wearing a Braindead graphic tee in a climbing gym, you can safely assume that they're gonna flash your project with absolutely no remorse. But how did this streetwear brand that now sells pieces for hundreds and hundreds of dollars and that's only been around for a decade find such strong footing in niche subcultures like skating, rollerblading, Magic the Gathering, and most importantly, rock climbing? Well, it started with an email. In 2014, Kyle Ng was gifted a graphic t-shirt by Ratbrain, a bootleg t-shirt project by Australian graphic designer Ed Davis, and Ng was enamored by the graphic tee. The visual heavy design had an underground aesthetic inspired by B-movies, comics, and skate culture, all things Kyle was also deeply passionate about. Nothing feels better than connecting with someone over a shared love, and Kyle felt that connection just through the graphic tee. Kyle had a love of clothes and design since he was a teenager. When 18, he dropped out of high school in the California Bay Area, a short drive from Berkeley, and moved to LA to study film. Once in LA, Kyle began hanging out in 181 Martel Gallery, run by Darren Romanelli, or better known as Dr. Romanelli, an artist famous for repurposing vintage clothes into limited edition fashion, furniture, and collectibles. He's collaborated with major brands such as Converse, Disney, and Coca-Cola, as well as artists like Kendrick Lamar. This emphasis on collaboration would be something that Kyle would take to heart and later apply to Braindead. When Romanelli asked Kyle to create a window display for an upcoming collection, it inspired the then 22-year-old to start making tote bags and t-shirts of his own, also out of clothing scraps. And from that came his first brand, Farm Tactics. Fast forward a few years and Kyle's founded another brand, AXS Folk Technology, a lifestyle brand combining both the old utilitarian world with futuristic technology. Since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with the idea of not fitting in, Ng said, and his desire to not fit in showed in his work. With his inspirations from AXS Folk Technology coming from the 60s and 70s counterculture, and small subcultures often pushed to the side by the mainstream. In 2013, Braindead became reality. Ng was working with Urban Outfitters in the outdoor clothing concept department, but Urban Outfitters was against Ng's focus on streetwear and graphic tees. Kids don't care about this. Kids want to wear a graphic t-shirt, Kyle said, referring to what Urban Outfitters wanted to pursue in the outdoor clothing department. Ng's concept was canceled, and since Urban Outfitters wasn't going to finance Ng's new graphic tee focused streetwear brand, he had to find another way. So when that graphic tee designed by Ed Davis arrived at his doorstep, he knew this was the guy to collaborate with. Ed Davis was already an established graphic designer and art director living in Australia. Ed had worked on a retail streetwear storefront, the Doomsday Store, as well as the bootleg tee project Ratbrain. When Ed received that email from Kyle asking to collaborate, Braindead was born. The brand was formed in 2014 with Kyle Ng and Ed Davis as co-founders. It didn't matter that they were 8,000 miles apart. The goal was simple: make cool shit for niche subcultures they were into. Their main focus was on what originally caught Kyle's eye to email Ed in the first place: the graphic tee. A motto they lived by being, if the graphic wasn't cool, people wouldn't wear it. The graphic tee hadn't even been around for a century at this point. It was invented in World War II when bored soldiers began doing arts and crafts on their t-shirts. They applied custom logos with paint and stencils to represent their units, bases, ships, and deployments. But it wasn't until the summer of 1942 for the rest of the world to catch on to the craze of the graphic tee. When Life magazine published its July edition, the graphic tee hit the stratosphere. All of a sudden, you could communicate to others just by the graphic on your shirt what your favorite band, sports team, or university was. And for the two founders of Braindead, the graphic tee was the ultimate platform for messaging and the initial focus of the brand. Their graphics combined 60s hippie art, post-punk, sci-fi, and 90s counterculture. The initial graphics were wacky and unpredictable, the colors nostalgic yet futuristic. If you're liking this niche video on climbing and fashion and haven't already, subscribe. I've got other niche climbing videos on my channel and more on the way. Anyway, for the graphics, Kyle drew inspiration from artists like Mike Kelly, Gary Panter, Chris Burden, Jim Shaw, and Paul McCarthy. These pieces by Mike Kelly especially remind me of some of Braindead's graphics. The thin line work, heavy shading, and punk styling are all things Braindead would adopt for their early graphic tees. Like two star-crossed lovers on opposite sides of the planet, they were forced to find a workflow that was complementary for their extreme distance. And what they came up with was that Ed would research graphics and references for the shirt designs, assemble the ideas in collage form, then pass those initial designs over to Kyle for him to position them within the Braindead brand, and later to finalize the designs. Often Ed wouldn't even see the final graphic before it was printed on a shirt. There was a necessary trust between the two. The idea behind what would become a graphic on a shirt was simple: make graphics for that they're into. Focus on niche and underrepresented subcultures and produce graphic tees with an emphasis on the visuals for those very people. They didn't want to make t-shirts that just came off cool or stole from the subculture. They wanted to set foot in places where these subcultures lived and flourished, making a lifestyle brand that was for them. Collaborations were essential for Braindead as a way to earn trust in these subcultures, as well as a way for their collections to be seen by more eyes. When a musician is featured on another artist's album, there's a level of trust that their stuff is also worth listening to. Braindead applied that philosophy to streetwear, collaborating with brands like Reebok, Converse, Vans, Asics, Magic the Gathering, Dickies, Oakley, Marvel, Carhartt, and the North Face. Their collaboration with the North Face in 2019 was their first introduction to the outdoor and climbing space, a 9-piece collection of streetwear items that featured psychedelic graphics and colors inspired by the 1960s California hippie movement, as well as the North Face's Berkeley roots. The focus of the collection was around the idea that the expedition was a state of mind. They reimagined some of the North Face's most classic pieces, the Denali, Nuptse, and Mountain Jacket, and through this collab they formed a very important relationship. A relationship with the North Face athlete and one of the strongest female climbers, Ashima Shiorishi. Ashima is known for her fashion, a staple being the custom pairs of pants that she wears while climbing, which are made by her mother. As Ashima and Kyle became friends from the initial North Face collab, and as Braindead was looking to burrow deeper into the growing culture of the climbing community, Ashima was a logical choice for a collaborator. In the summer of 2020, the Ashima by Braindead Zenith was born. In climbing, you just don't see that many cool shoes with different colorways and different options, and we wanted to introduce that. And they did just that. It stands out among the rest as one of the few pairs of climbing shoes to push itself with color and design. One of my favorite designs for a climbing shoe of all time. Colors you rarely see in climbing shoes. The purple, teal, and orange materials, complemented with the accent of the yellow Braindead Evolve collab logo, is just the cherry on top. Not to mention this is also just a great climbing shoe with it being an Evolve Zenith. Fashionable and utilitarian. Highbrow and lowbrow. Just what Dr. Romanelli ordered. But Braindead wasn't done with rock climbing just yet. Rock climbing had been growing exponentially, with more climbing gyms opening up than regular fitness gyms in the US. And it was only going to get bigger with bouldering, speed climbing, and sport climbing being introduced in the Olympics in Tokyo. Streetwear and fashion had also continued to be an important aspect of climbing. Not only could you express yourself with your climbing shoes and the chalk bag around your waist, but with the clothes on your back. Climbers were becoming more interested in what they wore, and at the same time, streetwear was increasing in popularity, with brands like Supreme, Stussy, and Carhartt entering the mainstream. But climbers needed a brand for themselves, and Braindead was irking to be just that. They just needed to position themselves even more into climbing culture. In the same year as the Ashima by Braindead Zenith was released, Braindead would follow it up with their second collab with the North Face, this time focusing even more on climbing culture, combining the North Face's iconic color blocking detail with a new Braindead color perspective. They released a collection of outerwear as well as climbing accessories. Jackets, fleeces, chalk bags, and climbing bags, all inspired by North Face's classic pieces. The collection was in celebration of Global Climbing Day, a climbing holiday heavily supported and promoted by the North Face. And a portion of the proceeds went to All Rise Outdoors, a nonprofit whose goal is to increase access to climbing for underserved communities. And this was another relationship that Braindead would continue to grow over the years. This collab raised climbers' continued awareness of the brand and would solidify their place in climbing culture. But Braindead wasn't just in the market of selling streetwear of niche subcultures. Their next goal was to make culture. My business is built off culture. If we're saying we're a lifestyle brand, then we need to create culture. And the way that they were going to do that was with third places. Braindead began building its own culture by putting on events and opening up stores. They held a Magic the Gathering tournament, a ping pong tournament with singer-songwriter Faye Webster, a disc golf tournament with Mountain Dew, a climbing competition. They even opened up a movie theater called Braindead Studios to hold events and screenings. Their goal with all these projects was to bring people together with a shared love. And it worked. Not only did it probably sell more graphic tees, but more importantly, it made people develop stronger ties to Braindead in the real world. There's a reason I care more about this shirt from Fightmaster, a musician I saw in concert, than a random graphic tee I bought online. It's because of the story. I was in a real place having a real experience, and that shirt represents that and reminds me of that time. And now all these people who attended these Braindead events also have that with exclusive merch that was in collaboration with the events they put on. Braindead has continued to go the extra mile by showing up for underrepresented subcultures in places where they actually are, or inviting them to their space. The climbing competition at Long Beach Rising is a prime example of this. Through this event, they supported climbers and developed stronger ties to the climbing community. The All Rise Fest is a collaboration with the Long Beach Rising Climbing Gym in LA, Arc'teryx, and the nonprofit All Rise Outdoors. It's an all-level climbing competition featuring local and national athletes, but it's more of a community event than anything. They have musicians and DJs, food vendors, advocacy programs, and pro climbers like Ashima Shiorishi and Brooke and Sean Rabitou, and the proceeds of the event go to All Rise Outdoors, which then feeds back into the climbing community by providing a pay-what-you-can membership program at Long Beach Rising. Climbing can be an extremely expensive hobby to enter, with gym membership costs, climbing shoes, and chalk bags. Then if you get into sport climbing or trad climbing, the costs skyrocket even further. Everyone should be able to climb, regardless of their financial situation. And Braindead contributing to this builds that trust that this is a brand that climbers should look to support. What began at Long Beach Rising is now spread across the world with events in New York City, Chicago, Toronto, and London. The Braindead store within the Long Beach Rising Climbing Gym is where I first heard of the brand. I was unsure what it was. All I knew were the graphics graphics were cool and climbers were wearing it. And that built trust for me that it was a brand worth wearing. When I see someone I know or admire repping a brand, I innately trust it more than if I were to stumble upon it on my own. With Braindead being where climbers are, it makes climbers associate the brand with something they already like. And in turn, when they rep the brand, their friends or other gym goers see them repping it, and soon you got people in climbing gyms all around the gosh dang world wearing Braindead tees. Would Braindead still be successful even without these events and emphasis on the climbing community? Yeah, probably. But I think it would have much more surface level consumers. They would have people go into stores and buy something simply because it's got the look they want. And there's nothing wrong with that. I do that all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people who shop Braindead do as well. But with the extra work they're putting into these subcultures, they're building stronger relationships with the people that they're making clothing for, and a deeper connection for them to come back time and time again to rep the Braindead brand. Braindead isn't the same streetwear line that it was in 2014, and that's intentional. When describing the brand, Kyle Ng said, "The Braindead aesthetic is fluid. It's always changing because it's influenced by so many things. I would say it's impossible to pin it down to any one description. It changes as we change." And it's doing just that. Ed Davis is no longer with the brand, and their more recent collections include far more varieties of products. Blazers, plates, perfumes. But with all that change that Braindead perpetually stays in, one thing remains the same. They continue to make stuff they're into. And people buy it because if the graphic wasn't cool, people wouldn't wear it. I need to go to sleep. It is 1:10 a.m.